Hi, my name is Ted McClelland, and I am going to tell a story about the Hodag, a creature who terrorized the north woods of Wisconsin in the late 19th century during the logging days. And when I'm done, Ray Valindo is going to sing a song that was written by loggers in Wisconsin during that time period. Here it is, the Hodag. Rhinelander, the mayor told the civic boosters gathered in his office, is the boomingest little town in northern Wisconsin. We're right in the middle of one of the biggest stands of Norway and jack pine in the country. We've got half a dozen sawmills running day and night. We've got paper mills. The railroad and the river delivered millions of logs here every year. So we need to boost ourselves. Chicago had a World's Fair just 3 years ago. The least we can do is throw a county fair. I asked you fellas here because I'm looking for an attraction that will draw a crowd, not just from the county, but from all over the Midwest. Gideon Marshall, the sawmill owner, suggested building a half-mile clay track to race trotters. I doubt we can get Star Pointer up here, he said, mentioning the horse that had just set the world record, but we can bring in horses from all over the state. Green Bay's starting a new semi-pro football team, suggested Adolf Gritzmacher, who oversaw one of the paper mills. We can get them up here to challenge our boys. Then Eugene Shepard spoke up. Shepard was a timber cruiser, an agent hired to inspect and buy woodland for investors looking to get rich in the logging business. He also speculated in land himself, which had made him one of the wealthiest men in Rhinelander. It did not follow, however, that he was one of the most respected. He was notorious for practical jokes, charging tourists a quarter to smell an exotic scented moss, which was an ordinary moss he had scented with perfume, and devising an imitation muskellunge to leap out of Lake Ballard, thus convincing summering fishermen it deserved the title, the greatest muskellunge fishing in the world. But it was precisely for this reputation as a self-promoting mountebank that the publicity-seeking mayor had invited Shepard to plan the fair. Any town can put on a horse race or a football game, Shepard declared. We need an attraction that can only be found in Rhinelander. We need to capture a Hodag and put it on display. The Hodag, for those unfamiliar with Northwoods lumbering, was a sharp-fanged, sharp-clawed, scaly beast that emerged from the ashes of a cremated work ox. Oxen led hard lives in the lumber camps, hauling back-breaking log skids under the goads of skinners who swore at them in French or Swedish or English or German. Driven to the limits of its strength, an ox seldom lived longer than 6 years. Even in a life so brief, it absorbed so much profanity that loggers believed its carcass had to smolder for 7 years to burn away all the curses. At the end of this period, when the pyre finally guttered out, there arose a Hodag, a distillation of and a revenge for all the cruelty the ox had suffered in its working life. A primordial creature in miniature, the Hodag was 7 feet long and fought the world with sharp horns and a set of spikes that ran from neck to tail. The Hodag was so fierce that it took a hunting party of lumberjacks an entire day to kill one. Their shotgun shells bounced off its hide, so they attacked their prey with dynamite, setting the Hodag on fire. The flaming creature ran through the woods for 9 hours, burning down so many trees that the lumber camp had to relocate to Minnesota. There is no such thing as a Hodag, protested Mr. Gritzmacher from the paper mill. That's just a tall tale you heard from those lice-infested shanty boys in the camps. There is indeed such a thing as a Hodag, retorted Mr. Shepard, who didn't mind being thought of as a charlatan, but hated being called a liar. I saw one just last week. I was out inspecting a stand of pines north of town when I smelled something I can only describe as a combination of buzzard meat and skunk perfume. I looked down and sure enough, there was a Hodag. As soon as he saw me, he ran off and hid behind a pine tree. I know where he is and I can capture him and put him on display for 10 cents a peek. If you capture a Hodag, I'll pay $100 to see it, Mr. Gritzmacher challenged. With that pecuniary motivation in mind, Shepard enlisted the aid of the Ancient Order of the Reveating Society, a group of local sportsmen who fought bears with their fists out of a sense of fair play. Since a Hodag had never been captured alive, the society agreed to the challenge and helped Shepard dig a pit 50 feet in diameter and 30 feet deep near the spot where he had seen the Hodag. They covered it with poles and hid the poles under leaves and grass. Here's my plan, Shepard explained. Now, as all of you know, Hodags only eat white bulldogs, and only on Sundays. So I'm going to take a bulldog out to the woods, and when the Hodag chases after it, he'll fall right into the pit. The only white bulldog in Rhinelander belonged to Mrs. Adelbert Weiss, a widow who would never have allowed her sole companion to be used as Hodag bait. Fortunately, Mrs. Weiss was a weekly churchgoer, so at noon on Sunday, Shepard and the Reveaters lured the dog from its house with an ox stake, attached him to a leash, and spirited him into the woods, where Shepard walked him around and around the pit. Just as he had expected, the Hodag caught the scent of its favorite prey and came racing through the pines on its short but swift legs. It leaped toward the bulldog and crashed through the logs. into the pit that had been prepared as its prison. In an article for New North, Rhinelander's weekly newspaper, Shepard had once described as the Hodag as a terrible brute who assumes the strength of an ox, the ferocity of a bear, the cunning of a fox, and the sagacity of a Hindu snake. And it is truly the most feared animal the lumbermen can come in contact with. So feared that once it was trapped in the pit, not even the bear fighters of the ancient order of the Revealing Society had the courage to chain it up and force it into the cage in which it would be displayed at the fair. The Hodag ran around and around the margins of its prison, emitting a furious roar of a volume last heard on this continent when the woolly mammoth roared here. The party agreed that only an unconscious Hodag could be confined to a cage, and that only chloroform was powerful enough to disable such a vigorous creature. One of the reveaters was the town's doctor, and agreed to fetch a month's supply from his office. While he ran this errand, the hunters laid the logs back over the pit, so the Hodag couldn't see his way to freedom. In the darkness, the beast went silent, and remained so until the doctor returned with a jar of chloroform under each arm. "This will be enough to knock out a dozen Hodags," he boasted. But when the logs were rolled away, the Hodag was gone. Angrily, and against the advice of the reveaters, Shepard clambered down into the pit to find out what had happened to his prize. At the bottom, he discovered a Hodag-sized hole. With its long, spiny claws, the Hodag had tunneled its way to freedom. Shepard, however, was not so easily defeated, especially when civic pride and a $100 reward were at stake. He ordered the reveaters to dig up a tree stump and load it onto the wagon he had hired to carry the Hodag back to Rhinelander. With the help of Luke Kearney, an artistic friend, he spent the next 4 months chipping and carving that stump into a life-size replica of the Hodag who had escaped from the pit. When the sculpture was finished, he covered it in an ox's hide and fitted it with the bull's horns. Like his idol, the recently deceased Phineas Taylor Barnum, Shepard was a master at deceiving the public for personal profit. On the day the fair opened, he set up his imitation Hodag in a tent illuminated only by the sunlight that leaked through the seams and hid it behind a velvet curtain. Outside the tent, he erected this hand-painted sign. "See the Hodag, the fearsome Northwoods legend, captured and on display for the first time anywhere. 10 cents. When spectators paid their dime, they were allowed to peek through the curtain. Unbeknownst to anyone outside the Shepard family, Eugene's sons Leighton and Claude had concealed themselves inside the tent. Whenever the curtain parted, they shook the Hodag via a system of hidden wires while growling and roaring in an imitation of the cry their father had described for them. The Hodag earned Shepard hundreds of dollars in admission fees. It was such a hit in Rhinelander he took it to the State Fair in West Dallas. The one man who wasn't fooled was Mr. Adolf Gritzmacher. As a businessman, Mr. Gritzmacher did not part lightly with $100. Before he would grant Shepard the reward money, he asked a zoologist from the State University to verify the Hodag's authenticity. Fascinated by this possible discovery of a species unique to Wisconsin, the zoologist took a train up from Madison, paid a dime to enter Shepard's shed, and pronounced, "That's just a block of wood." We will never know whether Eugene Shepard actually captured a Hodag, or even whether Hodags existed. They certainly don't today. Andy W. Brown, a friend of Shepard's, invented a steam-driven log hauler, which he christened the Hodag in honor of the animal whose extinction it would cause. With machines to haul logs, oxen were no longer needed in the lumber camps, and once oxen were no longer burned after short lives of hard toil, Hodags ceased to exist. Shepard was unembarrassed by his hoax's discovery. For years afterward, he displayed his wooden Hodag for visitors to his resort on Lake Ballard. He also gathered his original hunting party for a photo with the Hodag. Whether or not the Hodag was real was not important to Shepard. What was important was that he had fulfilled the task the mayor had assigned him, drawing attention to Rhinelander. Today, perhaps only Loch Ness in Scotland is more closely identified with a creature whose existence has never been verified by science. A fiberglass statue of the Hodag scowls outside the Chamber of Commerce. Rhinelander High School sports teams are nicknamed the Hodags. Hodags adorn Rhinelander police cars. Rhinelanders play softball in Hodag Park, finance their car purchases at Hodag Auto Loans, and get the oil in those cars changed at Hodag Express Lube. More than a century after its last sighting, the Hodag is still alive in Rhinelander. And now here's Mareva with the song.